TV shows, OVAs, ONAs, movies, I feel like most anime fans can name one that they love. However, I've noticed that one format falls through the cracks. Bar a few outliers, most TV show anime seem to go unnoticed. As someone who's watched a good few, I don't really know why. I found them to be the best for comedy personally. The directors know they have to get the timing just right, which they typically do. Even with more serious shows, the runtime doesn't negatively impact the themes, as long as it has a good director anyway. But regardless of how other people feel about them, I can safely say that I love them. So let's get into some shows that I love and why. Simply put, Sweet Valerian is an absurdist magical girl anime. A magical girl anime made by Clamp, no less. Any Mahou Shoujo fan knows what that means. It's pure fun, feeling somewhat like something they could air on Adult Swim. If they dubbed it, Super Milk-chan style, I think it would have a cult following. But anyway, let's go over its plot. In Asialand City, a city being terrorized by monsters caused by stress, we have our three girls. Kanako, a girly girl living on her own and working multiple part-time jobs. Pop, who owns a gaming company and dresses a little tomboyish. Then lastly, Kate, a fashionista and professional model. These girls turn into the relaxation team Valerian, which are cute bunny girls. As someone who loves magical girls with her whole heart, I really like this. Obviously, I love the typical magical girl outfit, but them being bunnies really sets them apart. As a relaxation team, our three rabbits must figure out how to de-stress the once people, now monsters, and save the day. With that said, the plot is really only there for the show to exist. It's a comedy anime with a 3-minute runtime each episode, so you can expect it to be completely unserious. There's nothing wrong with that though, as the comedy is actually funny. I'd like to mention though that the girls are pretty two-dimensional and stereotypical, but I think this is a good thing. It gives every girl someone to relate to, and it's not like you can make a deep character like Fuminori within the time constraints. So, as I said earlier, it's an absurdist show, specifically an absurdist comedy. In one episode, the girls have to go to this weird land and have a weird alien thing Mimi's seen in train them. His voice actor was perfectly cast. He has this creepy Oji-san voice. All the seiyus are good though. Kate's deadpan and Kanako's range of damsel in distress or delinquent is amazing. The visuals are complimentary too. This is going to be a common theme for the rest of this video, but you can tell they had no budget. However, they didn't bite off more than they could chew. Instead, the animators just had as much fun as they could for 3 minutes. I'd assume this is why it's a TV show as opposed to a regular show actually. Anyway, the simple designs were a great choice as there is a lot of fluidity and almost constant movement within the animation. All the monsters were creative too, always looking like a caricature of whatever caused the monster's stress. I have to say though, this whole show's visuals are very unique. The girls' humans designs, the art style and the animation are all Y2K in the best way. And with current anime trends, the simplicity is refreshing. The simplicity actually reminds me of Aqua Teen Hunger Force. A weird comparison, but the crowd shots could be from an alternate timeline Kawaii Team Hunger Force. Maybe a more apt comparison would be anything Sanrio, as they're plain cute, but I digress. Down to the Y2K-ness though, we have Panda Boo, a mascot. You don't really see these in anime nowadays, but I hope sometime in the future they'll make a comeback. Sweet Valerian got a DVD OVA within its release year and a one-shot published a year after the TV show. The specials are just more of the same. I did find it funnier than the original show though. The TV anime had Hiroaki Sakurai directing, and Ikeda Shigetaka directing the OVA, so that may explain me liking it more. Overall though, it's not that different, and if you enjoyed the TV show you should check it out, it's only 8 episodes long. The manga, which is a 4-comer by the way, is an adaptation but with more content. A few episodes were adapted, but most of it is new. The general hilarity carried through here, so it was a good read. Had expectedly cute art and some silly faces that'll end up in my reaction folder. In one arc though, Kanako got drunk and turned violent. I had no idea how they got that in there considering it's for little kids, but it gave me a chuckle for sure. And one more thing before I stop talking about the manga, I just wish to say that the woman who worked on this also worked on an Angry Birds manga. I have no idea why this was funny to me, but it was. It's kind of like the elusive Fortnite manga in that regard. I honestly hope I can read that one day, but with that said, let's wrap this up. I think my feelings towards Sweet Valerian are pretty clear. I like it. Has cute rabbit girls saving the day, girls being girls, and some silly jokes. There's not a lot more I could ask from it, and I'd recommend the show or manga to anyone interested. Momoiro Sisters is the only show in this video that may be a little decisive, not because of its quality, but because of it being an ecchi show. And not any ecchi, but one that I felt was more like an exploration of female sexuality, rather than an observation. Kind of like Sex and the City, or what I imagine that show to be like anyway, I'm not watching that. But while my feelings on ecchi range from complete apathy to annoyance, I really did like this show. It stars as 2 titular sisters, Sakura and Momoko. They're friends and boyfriends. There's not any particular plot, it's just about the girls becoming women and the women being women. Seeming as this is a coming of age comedy, that was definitely the right choice. although they did have an arc where they were stranded on an island, so some wacky stuff does indeed happen. One of these wacky things was a dolphin and a very crudely drawn fish reading yaoi. It felt poetic somehow. The real charm of this show comes from two things, the comedy and the relationships. For the former, the timing is simply always on point.
誰です、今の。神谷さん、前の本部長。ああ、前のか。あんなに素敵なおじさまがいたら仕事に燃えちゃいそう。何言ってんの？鬼の民谷って社内でも有名だったのよ。最近の若い子は何にも知らないんだから。最近の若い子、なんなのこの言い方。
Mind you though, I just found the jokes themselves to be funny, like this.
今時の女子高生は約半数が経験済みか。ねえ桃子、今の女子高生ってそんなに経験豊富なの？どうかな。はあ、結局クラスの3分の2は経験済みか。ねえね
え桃子ちゃん、見て見て。ね、秋葉原電脳組ってアニメのコスプレかわいいでしょ。ね。
あんたは少数派ね。
何が？
The author has a little persona of herself in the show too. She talks to the audience through signs, adding on to the jokes. I also felt like it never became distasteful with the ecchi jokes. It definitely might not be for everyone, but I really can't hate on it. I quite liked it in fact. It's like a show I'd record on TV then watch really late at night behind my parents' backs. I actually did this before with a show called Broad City when I was 10 or so and my dad caught me. It was kind of horrifying, but that's besides the point. Now, onto the latter, the relationships. Each girl, bar three for reasons I'll get into later, has a guy she is or wants to be with. They all get their time in the spotlight, and as someone who can't really help but ship characters, I was more than thankful for this. Anyways, I'll give a quick rundown on my favourites and their love life. First, Momoko and Akira. Momoko is an inexperienced girl who wishes she wasn't. She does eventually get asked up by a guy though, which is of course Akira. He's actually in middle school when they start dating, which I think is supposed to be a reflection of her innocence. They both grow with time though, realising their feelings are only natural. The show ends with them still being awkward teenagers, but that's also only natural. Most people turn 14 and stay that way forever, and I am no exception. Our next couple are Sakura and Rin. They're co-workers and adults in their 20s or 30s. They only became an item after they get drunk together and Rin says he would marry Sakura. Honestly, Sakura is an awful girlfriend. She's pretty rude in general. She even stranded the poor man on an island, but I'm not going to critique a woman for having hobbies. I actually did like her though, even if I wouldn't want to be around her. The power of good writing or whatever. Now, our last couple. I saved the best till last, Yukari and Tsuchikawa. I wish they got a spin-off anime or something. The relationship is simply adorable. Yukari is insecure about her body because of, to put this as eloquently as I can, sizable her chest is. All the men in her life only care about her body, ignoring her as a person. But Tsuchikawa is the man who cares about one thing and only one thing, food. Instead of lusting over Yukari, the relationship starts with her cooking for him. She even makes a pork chocolate bento for him on Valentine's Day, which is a real thing and sounds absolutely vile, but each their own I guess. The relationship develops from here, and Tsuchikawa does actually end up falling for Yukari for more than her food. I seriously think a josei rom-com about this would be amazing. I'm not really one for rom-coms, but I'd be there day one for that. I just found them unbelievably cute together. I'll probably rewatch this again just for these two. Going back to the three girls with no specific boyfriend, they're all Momoko's friends. Miki has a boy in her life, but we never know his name, let alone see him. I think the author just used her to have a juxtaposition between her and Momoko. Moika is more like Momoko, a wee bit more experienced, but is too busy reading yaoi doujinshi to bother with 3D men, very based. I must say that I appreciate the show having a Fujishi character by the way, especially as she has diverse interests, as we can see with the cosplay she wanted to have everyone wear. The last girl, Fukia, is a gag character more than anything. She has hemorrhoids, so I guess she has bigger things to worry about. I love how she always winters at Moiko's yaoi because of what they typically do in those. I wonder where the author even got that idea from. From what I've said, you can tell I quite like the show. I do, but when I mentioned low budgets being a common theme in this video, I was not kidding. In the last few episodes, starting from 18, there will be random switches to digital. I do, have always, and will always love cell animation more than I ever could digital, but I wouldn't say I dislike digital. However, the fact that it's random 5-second scenes that are for some reason digital, you can just tell that they ran out of money. It's definitely not the worst looking show though or anything, and the random snippets of digital were arguably good for the time if you ignore how saturated the colours are. The peanut budget is super evident in the last episode though. They have the last few moments be a photo of a building and some text. I've never seen an anime switch to digital then to photos mid-episode before, so it was an experience of nothing else. Speaking of the last episode, the weird visuals aside, it was actually very, very cute and I loved it. It was an AU of sorts where everyone was an idol or in the idol industry, and still the usual hilarity ensues. I'm a big idol fan, so maybe I'm biased, but I did love it. I actually wish the idol anime industry would do the opposite. Where's a Glossier for Aikatsu, or that for Idolmaster but well written? That is a can of worms for a whole nother day though. Anyway, before I end this section, I want to mention that Momoiro Sisters was based on a manga, around from 1993 to 2002 maybe. There's conflicting sources on when it ended, but I can't find it scanned online. I don't have the resources to buy £10-20 per piece manga imported, but I assume the manga is the same quality as the anime, so I hope the scans pop up someday. There's also another Momoiro Sisters thing I can't find online, kind of. The ending song in FLAC. There is a song on YouTube which I'll link below. One of them has those silly cat and dog memes with the visuals which got a chuckle out of me. I do hope I'll be able to listen to the song in FLAC soon. It's an adorable song. My audiophile tendencies aside though, let's wrap this up. Momoiro Sisters is a fun show, and if you like the humour it offers, please do give it a shot.
西暦2010年、メディアバブルとなったラジオ業界に舞い降りた少女マイコ。彼女は業界初のアンドロイドアナウンサーなのだ。
It's 2010 and the radio industry is falling. To retain listeners and money, Kodomo Group hires the first Android radio personality, Maico. The anime follows her and her co-workers as they set out to make the best radio show in Japan. Out of these three, Maico is definitely my favourite. Right now, it's actually my top 10 favourite anime of all time. There are a few reasons for this, and most of them come in the form of characters. The rest is down to the writing or comedy. I would say this show could be split into two groups of episodes, comedy focused and then character development focused. Both types were good, but in my opinion there wasn't a bad episode in the entire show. This is a comedy anime, so let's get into what I found to be funny. I'm repeating myself with what I said earlier about the other shows, but the timing was perfect. They weren't typically ever laugh out loud jokes, but they weren't intended to be. I'm not going to lie and say it never got a full-blown cackle out of me though, so I present to you two of the most beautiful English moments in television history.
Nice to meet you. I have a pen.
Welcome to exciting event! The rolling crash on the banana! Challenger is... Mr. Robofechi!
Perhaps my 2011 weeaboo sense of humour isn't your style though. There's still more than enough reasons to watch this show. The names are Maico, Densuke, Matsan, Izumi, Kachin, Ume, Suga, and Masudamasu. These 8 are one of the best ensemble casts I've ever come across. The mixture between their sometimes explosive chemistry, amazing writing, flaws creating both humanity and comedy, their individuality, it's just awesome. The cast reminded me of Everyone Haruhi, which you simultaneously feel like you're people watching and part of the group. Every, minus one, of the characters knew each other before the show started, but we get to see their relationship actually develop, which I really do appreciate. Before I explain what makes them all awesome individually and as a group, here's a quick rundown on everyone. Maico is our protagonist. She has no life outside of the radio show as she is an android made explicitly for hosting. Even so, she's still a sincere girl, wanting nothing more than to make her listeners and peers smile. She often struggles to do this though, usually being too sincere. I'll get into this later and I may sound crazy now, but trust me. I think she's a good representation of women with ASD. Stepping aside from that, I found her love for humanity and the smiles of others to be really adorable. I like the small details in the early show of her being slow to both compute or react, and how she slowly got faster as the show went on. She would also uppercut or throw grown men across the room for being inappropriate, which is both funny, and I like the characterization of her being a caricature of a human. This doesn't have much to do with Maico herself, but now that I've mentioned small details, she didn't have legs in the first episode due to manufacturing times, and Masudamasu said that it would take 2 weeks for them to be done. She gets her legs in the third episode, meaning it took 2 real-life weeks. I really appreciate the amount of thought put into every detail in this show. Moving on. Next, Densuke. He's an assistant director, and a rather useless one at that. None of his co-workers have any respect for him, they're all pretty mean to him actually. Maico is the only one to treat him like a person. He's nice to everyone, but especially Maico. Probably because she doesn't beat or berate him unlike everyone else, but I also think it's partially because he sees himself in her. His boss even physically abuses him in every episode, but we'll get to him in a minute. Anyways, Densuke doesn't really do anything about the way he's treated other than groan and rightfully call them mean. He's still pretty nice to everyone, in contrast to how everyone treats him. His love for radio, which has been going strong for at least almost a decade, outweighs any of his hatred for the people around him. I love this part of him, how even though he hates the treatment he gets each time he goes to work, he just doesn't give up. Not to mention his pure love of radio, as well as another hobby of his, collecting crown caps. I'll talk about this soon in detail. Onto the aforementioned Matsan. He's the director of the show. He came from a family of tomato farmers, but has been in the radio business for a good while. He's very prideful, a workaholic man, but is also very easily stressed. He's also balding and unbelievably insecure about it. Maybe it's old age, but I think his balding is from the stress. The gag of him blasting his scalp with anti-balding spray whenever he's slightly inconvenienced was always really funny to me. Densuke is his favourite stress ball, but he doesn't have any hesitation abusing anyone else. Overall, he's not a nice guy. Pretty darn awful if you ask me. Maico is the only kind person, apparently in this whole world, to Densuke, so he inevitably grows to like her. But Matsan rubs 100 pounds of salt into the wound by saying he has a robot fetish and basically replacing Densuke's name with Robofetchi. I think this was him projecting though, as in episode 2, he was the one to blush at Maico. This is something he actually does a lot, like when he tells Densuke no one likes him and he's powerless, when he's in the exact same position. I do wonder if he's like this to Densuke specifically so much, as he too was once a young AD. Izumi is the music director of the broadcast. Being the MD, she only cares about doing her job and nothing else. There could be someone on fire next to her, but she's only doing what she's paid for. From this, I'm sure it's obvious how selfish she is. This usually does just result in a gag though, as opposed to Matsan's outright violence. Still, she isn't kind to others even when they're trying to be kind to her.
Izumi-san!
それ捨てといて。
全然励まされてないよ。
She'll just keep to herself though, so we don't know much about her or why she's like this until later on. Kachin is the program coordinator, and even though he's supposed to have power, he really doesn't. I do not kid when I say he's the pathetic anime man poster child for me. The guy pretended to be a horse and galloped around for his boss. He is the ultimate bootlicker. He's the type to throw his co-workers under the bus for a promotion. Honestly, this guy sucks, but I like laughing at him. We see his family later on in the show, and his relationship with them makes him redeemable, at least slightly. Ume is a sound mixer and a mute. I found it cool how he doesn't speak, and I actually wish there were more silent anime characters. He uses his soundboard to speak, which was a really nice touch. Ume is overall a pretty chill guy, but as he's not much for words, we only get development later on. I still think he's cool though. Suga is a very sadistic scriptwriter. He gets inspiration to write from seeing people suffering, and considering half of the show is Matsan beating Densuke, he's always all smiles. While at certain points I felt like he was a bad person, namely one point where the studio exploded with people in it because of him, I found him funny overall. Punchable, but funny. Now, lastly, Masadamasu. She doesn't speak much, and only appears on occasion, but she has a powerful presence, being chief director. Not to mention, she was the one who built Maico. She's also a little sadistic, but not like Suga. She actually wants this radio show to be good for the sake of her listeners, for a pretty sad reason at that. Regardless, she just seemed to enjoy watching them struggle, I guess in a people-watching way. It's mentioned she's the one keeping the program on life support by talking to higher-ups constantly, but other than that, she doesn't really throw them a bone. There's also some weird window cleaner guy who I think is a reference to something that happened in the manga. I'll talk about it in its respective section, but he's chill. Kinda creepy of how he's always lurking around, but he's still chill. Now you may be thinking, these people suck. I can't say you're wrong, even if I find it funny how awful they all are. But the best part of the show is seeing the characters grow. That's very into spoiler territory though, so I'll save the all for later. But do keep this in mind. Just like in Haruhi, our characters are a bit archetypical, and that if you watered down their characters and gave a sentence or two about them, there'd be someone else who could name a character similar to them. But it's not what's on paper that makes them amazing, it's the humanity the writing gives them, just like in Haruhi again. To give an example of this writing, let's talk about episode 9. There's supposed to be a guest for tonight's broadcast, but he's nowhere to be seen. Matsan is panicking for obvious reasons, so he forces Densuke to be tonight's guest. He poorly pretends to be the guest, but after a little while, he just throws everything out of the window and speaks from his heart. Maico asks Densuke about his type. He says he wants a woman in his life who's kind to him, but he's obviously not getting any of that warmth from work, and radio is his life. He then starts talking about how he's bad at his job, messing up all the time. It's clear he has no confidence, as he even calls himself pathetic for all of this. But Maico tells him that none of this is pathetic, simply because he is trying. It's a simple moment and a simple message, but it's something I feel everyone should hear. Every character has an episode like this, where an issue within their lives or selves is brought to attention, and Maico just reminds them that people have the power to change their lives, they just have to be brave enough and try. I think it's spoiler time, so if you want to watch this show spoiler free, please do so. I still love the show after rewatching it, so I don't think spoilers would ruin it, and I am leaving huge events out. But you should watch the show and then come back. If you would like to skip the spoilers, please go to the timestamp on screen. Okay, hopefully this doesn't get too recappy, but I do have to say what happens to explain why I like it. Anywho, let me recap what I liked. One good thing Maico does is red herrings. Each episode has at least one red herring, but the one that stood out the most to me was an arc with Kachin and his family. In episode 5, Kachin receives a phone call and says he's fine with flowers. This happens and then ends, which looking back on it, I like how realistic this is. It's a small thing, but I feel like a lot of audiovisual media, especially anime, don't know what the word subtle means. If you've watched an anime before, you've seen a scene where something crazy happens, and every character, one by one, gasps. This has been a pet peeve of mine since I was 10, so yes, it does indeed drive me insane. But I like how Maico doesn't fall into this trap. Tangent aside, a character picking up their phone and chatting away might sound kinda clunky, but the scene was chaotic, and him talking on the phone only added to that, you'll just have to trust me. Anyway, in 2 more episodes, he repeats the same thing on the line. In one of these episodes, he actually lies about the caller being his girlfriend, which I found to be very funny. He really is the poster boy for pathetic anime men for me. But in the 13th episode, we finally find out what these phone calls mean. Now it's not like this is the only TV show to do this, but I like how it took 8 whole episodes to reveal any of the calls' meaning. On my first watch, I didn't even realise that they would have any meaning. I just thought it was leading up to some random gag. Let's talk about episode 13 though, as it's one of my favourites. If you remember, Kachi mentioned flowers. As it turns out, his family were arguing over whether to have flowers or a Kakashi doll by the front door. This isn't the most exciting of premises, but as with pretty much everything to do with Maico, it's the execution that makes it. I felt like I was young again, living with all my immediate family, arguing over which table suits the dining room better. It's not a story I'd recite to someone, but it's the kind of thing I'd think about in bed at night. Honestly, if I were an English teacher, I'd show this episode to my pupils to show off how enjoyable something can be if you're able to write believable, meaningful chemistry between characters. I just find it amazing how we see these characters once, Kachin's family I mean, and yet they're all distinct and individual. Not to mention, Kachin was not in this episode at all. You only hear Maico read a letter he wrote, and yet we learn so much about him. If you haven't watched Maico yet, please at least watch this episode. I did mention Maico does red herrings well, and while that is in my opinion very true, sometimes it is pretty heavy-handed. In one episode, Kachin mentions terrorists being in the area for basically no reason, and nobody commented on it. I feel like nobody commenting on it was the weirdest part. But anyway, feel free to guess what happened in the next episode. I wouldn't see this as a consistent issue, but it's one of the very few critiques I have with this show. Even in the first episode, there's a red herring and that pays off, but I'll get into that one in a little. I mentioned episode 9 and how I liked its writing, but there was something else about it. Densuke told Maico about his bottle cap collecting hobby, and because he just had so much love in his words, I actually started collecting them too. I only have a small collection right now, it's kind of pitiful looking, but I feel happy whenever I look at them. One reason is actually because I really do like Densuke. He's so passionate about his hobbies, namely radio. The whole show is, but Densuke's adoration for it stood out to me. I haven't started a radio station, but I've made plans for it, in my mind anyway. I'd make it otaku-centric, with Annie songs in the morning to hype you up and Moe Dempa to keep you awake in the evening, an advice corner for media recommendations, and the radio drama would be fanfiction. My amazing ideas aside, never would I have felt this way if it were not for Densuke. There's a decent few anime, games, visual novels where I can feel the passion through the screen, but not many that have given me a new hobby, and maybe soon too. Okay, now I want to talk about what's basically a headcanon, Maico representing autistic women. In the very first episode, Maico loses a screw. It's implied this affects her performance and she's broken. Now, obviously, having autism doesn't mean that you've got a few screws loose or something, or that you're broken, but I interpret it more like you're built different. In media generally, autistic characters are either very silly, so to speak, or super smart, or an awkward cute girl. Maico is arguably a combination of all three, which is why I love her so much. There's one episode I feel subtly represents what I mean well, episode 18. This is an amazing episode generally, and probably the best drama-focused episode in the whole show. While I was rewatching the show, I remember having this episode in the back of my head the whole time. Anyways, everyone's stuck in the studio due to a raging storm outside, so they're forced to put up with each other for hours more than they expected. A simple premise, one you can do a lot with, and they did. I'm not going to go through the episode frame by frame, so again, I recommend that you watch this show. Back to my point, Maico is charging, effectively sleeping, and everyone's arguing because of course they are. Little did they know that Maico was listening the whole time. I think this is symbolic of two things. Her not really being a part of the group, and her being an outsider looking in. Although this group has a rocky relationship, it's still a relationship. Maico not being able to participate, I feel, shows her being an outsider. She could hear all of it, which shows her being an outsider looking in. Now you may well be thinking something like, well, how does that make her autistic? Maybe she's supposed to represent being socially awkward. You'd be right and probably correct too. I doubt many Japanese writers in the 90s knew about ASD, so as cool as it would be to have a canonically autistic anime character I like would be, I don't think that is the case. However, one of the beauties of fiction is that you can interpret it in whatever way you wish. I'm sure there are many Maico fans that interpreted this as something simply relatable or simply moe or whatever else. Me personally, I found it relatable as an autistic woman. Without going to my sad anime backstory, that scene was stupidly relatable. At the end of the episode, Maico wakes up crying, and while everyone's still frustrated and tense, the atmosphere does change. I think we've all wished at least once that we could cry and everything would get a little better. Overall, this is one of the best episodes in the whole show, and if any other women with ASD are watching this video, first of all, hello, and second of all, I hope you feel the same way if you watch the show, which I certainly do recommend you do. Alright, now the spoilers are done with, let's talk about some miscellaneous things from within the show. First, the visuals. I love the art style and all the designs. They're simple but cute. I like how they all look like normal human people who could exist in real life, with the exception of being Maico. Her being an exception in and of itself is really cool though. I think if we had androids in real life, they would all have huge pink hair with red eyes. The backgrounds are all in CG for some reason. This one combination of it taking place in one room, with the exception of one singular episode, just shows the presumably minuscule budget, but I actually kinda like it. They didn't even have enough money to model the outside of the door, it's just a black void. Not only does knowing something so good was made with a couple of pennies show off the talent of the writers, it also has a lot of charm in and of itself, I guess like Ryukishi and Zun's art. I like the 90s sci-fi aesthetics too. Apparently, we'll still be using fax machines and CRTs 100 years in the future, but we'll have androids indistinguishable from humans. Very curious. Another interesting thing about the visuals is the fact that it's digital. Commonplace nowadays, but back in 1998, not so much. I'm very much a cell anime lover, as I mentioned before, so I would have preferred it being cell animated of course, but there's nothing wrong with it visually in that regard. And just because I mentioned it coming out in 1998, fun fact, this aired one day before Cardcaptor Sakura. Maico is also voiced by Sakura's seiyuu, which is a funny coincidence. The radio company honcho in the show is voiced by Lee too. Small world I suppose. In the same vein as sound, I really did like the music. Like with Momoiro sisters, I can't find any of the songs full in FLAC, but this time, I can't find them at all. I know a CD with the OST exists somewhere, but I don't know if anyone's ripped it. It's a shame because there's a song on there, Koishite Kisu, and it's a cute idol song, aka the best genre of music, and I will fight you on that. Hopefully someone rips and uploads it someday, or I'll be able to find it. The radio drama they air on the show, Yukie-chan SOS, is actually real too. I can't find this either, but I'm sure someone has it hidden away in their attic or something. If we're lucky, they'll upload that too. Anyway, the show has good sound design in general. I have a huge pet peeve of music playing at the wrong time. In certain really emotional moments, directors should just let their characters speak, not music. To me, emotional tracks are just like laugh tracks. They're just there to tell you when to say all. Maico never does this though. The music is only ever there when appropriate. The voice acting is amazing too. Both of these things, especially the seiyu's work, add to the realism of the show as well as the comedy. Speaking of the seiyus, Maico's VO sings the OP and ED. They're both awesome songs and I really like the OP. The OP's lyrics actually change over time, going from soulful gay to her singing about the sky. I think this shows Maico's growth as a person, as she goes from being wordless to singing about the first thing you see when you go out into the world. And ironically enough, due to this being about formatting, I'm not sure how to segue into this, but I like the mix between episodic and serialized episodes, as well as the comedy and drama. It really is the kind of show everyone could like. And speaking of episodes, this show probably has one of the best next week previews ever, alongside Galaxy Angel of course. Each one has an image of Maico's diary with a cute little drawing by her and some writing about what happened in this episode. All the while, someone speaks about what happens in the next episode. Pretty typical sounding, but with Maico's diary, you can really see her innocence and true feelings shining through. With the characters talking, it's more like you get a little diary entry from them too. I suppose because of the shorter episode runtime, the writers knew they had to say a lot with a few words. They definitely did well with such. And at the start of each episode, there's a little speech thingy. For the first 11 episodes, it's the same thing, but it changes thereafter. It was just commentary about what was going on in the show, but I did find it to be a very nice touch. If you skip OPs, please be sure to keep an eye out for these. As we did for the previous two shows, let's talk about the manga it was based on, and I say based on loosely. Why loosely, you may ask? Because it shows an art style, a handful of character names and the designs, but not much else. The manga is a wild ride, and not in a drive-through-zoo kind of way, but more like a car tumbling down a cliff kind of way. I do believe it was officially licensed though, so I guess someone liked it. I do have reasons for saying all of this though, so let me get into what this is and why I feel this way. First of all, let's get into what the manga is about, as its plot is nothing like the anime's. Basically, you have Maico, an impressive android but in reality a sex droid made for radio, and then people try to kill her, Masu and Densuke. And also, every woman ever seems to want to bone Densuke, or is at least happy with showing off her assets to him. That really is the entire manga, and it follows as coherently as I explained it. The paddling and pacing are both rather poor. I had to reread pages more times than I should have to understand what was going on. The story feels pretty unfocused too, like the author just wanted to do whatever with every chapter. I can appreciate that, but it doesn't make for the best of reads. And Maico is a sex robot. Why on earth is she a sex robot? I know it's an ecchi manga. The mangaka's first anime was a hentai even, but I have to say I'm happy they changed it in the anime. Not particularly for any pearl-clutching reasons, because I don't even hate ecchi or anything, but because I feel like it devalues her character. In the anime, Maico was literally made for radio and loved it with all her heart and soul. Being the first of her kind, she wasn't great at her job, but she sure as heck tried. And with her love of radio came her love of her listeners and co-workers. This just isn't there in the manga. I have to admit, because of all of this, I just did not finish the manga. I will admit that I am not the target audience, but it just was not something I was enjoying, so I did drop it in the end. I don't want to get too negative, especially as this is the last thing I'm talking about, so I'll end that there. I'll say a few things I enjoyed about the manga instead. 1. I like the character designs. The mangaka's art style is cute, and he's good at designing characters. I especially like how the girls dress. 2. Masu gets a lot more characterization in the manga compared to the anime. I liked how mysterious she was, but I did want more of her. The manga version doesn't even feel like the same woman, if I'm being honest, but I still liked her in there. Spoiler warning for the anime, so go to the timestamp on screen if you care. The suicide mentioned in the anime that made Masu want to improve the radio station is expanded upon. Is this necessary? No. Is it cool new info? Yeah. These are the only 3 things I can personally say I like, but maybe you'll like it. I'm kind of hoping somebody does because I feel bad for not liking it myself. If you're in the mood for an ecchi manga with cute designs, please do give it a shot. To sum this all up, I love TV anime shorts. I think you should too. Outside of the 3 I talked about in this video, there are others I love like Nyoranga, Fun Pharmacy, Susukune-chan, and of course, Digishara. There are a ton more I want to talk about on here, but more importantly watch. I hope that someone watching this gives the stuff I discussed a shot, or at least the format itself.